Hello, class. This is Quiz 2 Review covering chapters 5, 9, and 10. The process by which friends, friends of friends, acquaintances, and others in our social circle influence our behavior and health positively and negatively. That's social contagion. Remember the pandemic? Did it teach you anything about the influence of relationships? In your opinion, does social media help or hurt our relationships? Also, I'd like you to ask yourself, do the people I surround myself with influence my good habits or my bad habits? Okay. All of that relates to social contagion. Moving forward. Acts of helping or giving to others without thought of self-benefit. That is altruism. In chapter 5, there is a quote by English poet John Donne, circa 1624. It reads, "No man is an island." That refers to the fact that we cannot get through life successfully by ourselves. So if you haven't yet offered your help by volunteering to assist a friend or neighbor in need, give it a try. You'll be so glad you did. You'll experience what is called a helper's high, which is a warm feeling that is difficult to describe, but you'll absolutely know it when you experience it. Living in a wired world, another portion of chapter 5. And I'm going to introduce two terms here. The first, deliberate, repeated, and hostile actions that use information and communication technologies, including online web pages and text messages, to harm others utilizing intimidation, control, manipulation, false accusations, or humiliation. That is cyberbullying. A similar term, a form of cyberbullying that uses online sites like Twitter, email messages, and social media to harass victims and try to damage their reputation or turn others against them. And it may include false accusations, threats, identity theft, damage to data or equipment, or the solicitation of minors for sex. That is cyber stalking. Here's a bit more information about cyber stalking. It occurs most often in the context of ex-partner relationships. Most perpetrators are male and victims are female. A word of advice, be careful about the images that you create online because it may be misinterpreted by someone who means you harm. Both cyberbullying and cyberstalking can be criminal offenses punishable by imprisonment. Sharing personal information and experiences with another that he or she would not otherwise discover, it involves risk and vulnerability. We're talking about self-disclosure. Self-disclosure follows the norm of reciprocity, which means when one person opens up, automatically it signals for the other person to share in return. The mutual exchange strengthens trust and closeness. However, timing and depth matter. Too much too soon can overwhelm or damage a relationship, or in other words, less is more, particularly on the first date. A Latin term that means within. It's a state of closeness between two people, and is characterized by the desire and ability to share one's innermost thoughts and feelings verbally or non-verbally. We're talking about intimacy. Intimacy is built over time. It benefits college students particularly as closeness helps to ward off depression and it helps to foster a sense of belonging. Living together is more common today than it was in previous generations. Living together is also referred to as cohabitation. So 59% of couples cohabitate and about 53% marry. Cohabitating couples can register as domestic partners in some states. Reasons couples cohabitate: economics, particularly here in the Bay Area, it is very expensive to live. Social acceptance is very common today. More time together, you can test the relationship, and it is used as an alternative or a prelude to marriage. Governmentally, socially, or religiously recognized marriage in which two people of the same sex live together as a family, that is same-sex marriage. In a landmark decision in June 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution guaranteed a right to marriage for all Americans, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender. Same-sex couples make up 2 to 7% of all marriages. 58% get married, while 42% remain unmarried. Families are formed from one or both partners bringing children from a previous union to the new marriage. That is blended families. The definition of a blended family, also referred to as a nuclear family, continues to evolve and diversify. What remains consistent is young parents finding a way to complete college. As a matter of fact, being a parent is a motivator for you completing your degrees, whether that's an AA or a PhD. Chabot College, however, offers childcare resources to help you attend class. The behaviors, instincts, and attitudes associated with being sexual, that's sexuality. The expression of both masculine and feminine traits. This term also describes visual or stylistic blending of gender cues like clothing, hair, voice, or mannerisms that do not align with traditional binary norms. That's androgyny. There's two other terms associated with androgyny that you should be aware of. That would be positively androgynous and negatively androgynous. Positively androgynous describes the best of both genders, or in essence, the female compassion and the masculine independence blending of traits. Negative androgyny is the worst of both, or negatively androgynous is the worst of both, such as female dependency and masculine assertiveness. A small erectile structure on the female that corresponds to the penis on the male is the clitoris. The female sex organ that produce egg cells, estrogen, and progesterone are the ovaries. Okay, as you can see here, I have an illustration of both the external structures and the internal structures. The top illustration, you can clearly see where the clitoris is marked. It is housed between the labia majora and above the vaginal opening. The other structures in the external genitalia are the mons pubis, the urethra, the perineum, the anus, and the labia minora. All right. As far as the internal structures, the ovaries are this small structure here, which are connected to the fallopian tubes and the fimbriae. But we're also going to talk about the endometrium in your questions, as well as, actually, that is it. But just showing you where the endometrium is in relation to the ovaries and the fallopian tubes. Okay. Painful menstruation that interferes with daily functioning describes dysmenorrhea. Dysmenorrhea can be both primary and secondary. Primary dysmenorrhea is pain without an underlying disorder, whereas secondary dysmenorrhea is pain that's caused by a disorder such as endometriosis, fibroids, adenomyosis, pelvic inflammatory disease, or a structural anomaly in the uterus, fallopian tubes, or the endometrial lining. Okay. The portion of the male duct system in which immature sperm cells mature is the epididymis. The male sex organ that produces sperm and testosterone is the testes. If we're referring to one testes, singular, it's testes with an I, but when we refer to testes, we're referring to both structures. Okay, and as you can see here, there's both an illustration of the external genitalia as well as the internal structures. For the male, this is an illustration of a circumcised penis as well as an uncircumcised penis. Circumcision means cut. You have here the opening of the urethra. You have the glands or the head of the penis, as well as the testes. They're inside the scrotal sac, as well as the penis shaft here. Okay, and you will be tested on the vas deferens, the prostate, and the epididymis, which are these structures here. Okay, moving on. Having a gender identity that is opposite of one's biological sex, that is transgender. The term references gender identity, gender expression, and or behavior that does not align with sex assigned at birth. On your quiz, you will see the term referred to as gender people or gender identities or gender community. Okay, it is not referred to as transgenderism. Among adults in the United States, approximately 0.5% or 1.3 million identify as transgender. Among trans youth ages 13 to 17, they represent about 1.4% of the transgender community, which adds up to about 300,000. Okay. This process has 3 stages: labor, which is the longest, delivery of the baby, and also the delivery of the placenta. We're talking about childbirth. What is important for you to know about here is that an expectant mom must dilate for 10 centimeters, and the worst contractions occur at about 8 centimeters. That's when you're getting to the ring of fire. Okay. And the process typically occurs giving childbirth. It occurs between week 37 and week 42. The fusion of sperm and the egg nucleus describes fertilization. The initial stage of development for a multicellular organism is an embryo. A latex or polyurethane sheath worn over the penis during sexual acts to prevent conception and the transmission of disease. The female version of this lines the walls of the vagina, which I will show you in a moment. We're talking about the condom. Okay. So here are illustrations of both the female and the male condom. For the female condom, you're going to insert it inside the vagina, and there is a one end of the condom will lie at the base of the vagina. And for a male condom, it's important that when a male puts it on, that it is in the right position. So it should sit up kind of like a hat. If it is upside down, you cannot roll it down. So you have to flip it over. You put it over the glands. You squeeze the tip to create a reservoir and roll it all the way down to the base of the penis. And then you should be okay. However, the positioning in which a condom, putting it on correctly, rather, is extremely important because you want to prevent skin-to-skin contact, and also you want to prevent the seepage of fluids to not get in contact with the other person. So, putting on a condom properly will increase its effectiveness, but it's not nearly as effective as some other forms of birth control, which I will show you in just a few minutes. Actually, I'll show you right here. So the most effective are either the implant or an IUD or permanent sterilization. So either a tubal ligation or a vasectomy will be the most effective forms of birth control. The next level, either injectable birth control methods, the pill, the patch, ring, the diaphragm, they vary in their effectiveness. Usually they are used along with a barrier contraceptive to make sure that you are preventing pregnancy. But the least effective or things that should not be used by themselves are condoms, the withdrawal method, which we will talk about more, is not very effective. Fertility awareness methods are not very good, or just using a spermicide without a condom is not very effective. So you want to be mindful of that when you engage. A type of oral contraceptive um, pill, usually taken within 72 hours after intercourse, that can prevent unintended pregnancy after unprotected intercourse or the failure of another form of contraception, such as a condom breaking or slipping off. And it reduces the risk of pregnancy by 89% if taken within 5 days of unprotected sex. So Plan B is also referred to as an emergency contraception. The sterilization procedure in which each vas deferens is cut and tied shut to stop the passage of sperm to the urethra for ejaculation, we're referring to a vasectomy. This behavior involves withdrawing or pulling out the penis prior to ejaculation, so semen is released away from the vulva and the vaginal opening. That is coitus interruptus, which is another way of saying withdrawal or pulling out. Okay. The inability to conceive a child is simply infertility. Okay, your extra credit question, which is worth 7 points, is based on the TED Talk, His and Hers Healthcare. So review that. If you haven't yet completed that discussion, please review that before taking your quiz. All right. I wish you all luck, and I will be talking to you very soon. Thank you.